Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back for another positive talk. Hopefully, you all had an amazing weekend and are having a great start to the week. I know that I have today off from my corporate job and I get to do a positive talk, which is more of my entrepreneurial life coaching fun job. So I'm having a good Monday. Hopefully, you all are as well. Make sure, if you haven't already, go check out Positive Space, which is an extension to these positive talks for you all to interact with us. To two people talk. Not saying that that's bad, because I enjoyed these as well, but Positive Space is definitely a lot of fun as well. So let's give. Hello.
Hiya, you all right?
I was going to say, I see a black screen right now.
Can you see me now?
Yes.
Oh,
How are you
good.
doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Tried to
Thank
angle
you for
myself
having me
so
on.
like this lighting wasn't like hit me in the face awkwardly to where I was like glowing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I as soon as I saw your content, I was like, definitely someone that I would enjoy having a conversation with. So let's pull him on here. Awesome. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself so people know who you are, and then we can jump into a conversation.
Sure, yeah. My name's Michael C. Waring. I'm a self-love and empowerment coach. I help predominantly people from the LGBTQ plus community, but I do see allies as well. I speak on LGBTQ plus inclusion, addiction, as well as self-love and authenticity. And I have my own podcast as well, where people come on and share kind of that journey towards self-love and self-acceptance, which, yeah, I love. I absolutely love. So
Awesome.
that's
Well,
me.
that's like speaking my language, because like that's all the stuff that I have focused on as well, and I think that it's really important. And I think a lot of coaches made the journey to self-love, and once you discover that, it's like you just want everyone else in the world to discover it. So like doing the work to help people get there is like a beautiful thing. So I would love to hear a little bit more about like your journey to finding self-love to the point where you're now helping others find it.
Yeah. How long have I got? It's been a
6%.
journey. It's been a journey. But I guess for me, in childhood, I was bullied mercilessly, verbally and physically. And I didn't speak, like everybody else, all the other boys in class. My mannerisms were different as well. And I think the things that made me different, I also loved singing as well, which wasn't a very masculine thing to enjoy doing. So I was teased about that as well. And all of these things that made me different were picked on. And I think from a very young age, I kind of rejected myself to belong to everybody else in that way. Do you know what I mean? And I guess as well, there were societal narratives around being gay that framed that part of me in a negative light. There were laws as well that existed that again framed who I was in a negative light. So when I discovered through puberty I was gay, I felt like who I was wrong in some way. I don't feel that way anymore, but society's values introjected onto me and became my own beliefs about myself. Very subconsciously though, it wasn't in my awareness. And so I went through life. I came out aged 17 to my friends, 18 to my family. But then I went through life thinking I'm living authentically, but actually I'm living a lie because I'm not living true to myself. I'm living through fear of being rejected. I'm wanting people's approval. I'm wanting validation. All of these kinds of things. I'm reliant on love through outward means. Do you know what I mean? And I genuinely remember I used to think, I just want someone to fall in love with me because that will fix how I feel about myself. Do you know what I mean? And every relationship I had with that belief and that attitude was therefore toxic because, yeah, even the kind of person that I wanted to be with, I wanted, that macho man, if you like, because I thought that will protect me from some of the things that I've had in my life. But actually, what I realised, having hit rock bottom, because I also suffered with addiction to alcohol, and in recovery, I checked myself into a rehab facility. and that's where I started to discover personal development and the power of it. And when I did this, I started to find the love I was looking for outwardly within me. And I just instinctively knew that it had always been there. I don't know how, but I just knew. And like you shared earlier on finding it, it's like, wow, your whole life changes. You see things you didn't see before. You start to feel the fear and go after opportunity anyway. And you just start showing up as who you are and caring less about what other people think of you. Do you know what I mean? And that's how my life is today. And the result is that I live in a state of peace that I never had before. And things like being in a relationship, or, you know, it doesn't bother me anymore. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm in a relationship with me that's healthy. And that's the relationship that I always needed, was a healthy relationship with me. So yeah, that's kind of the journey in summary, making it very short.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, we're not taught to go on that journey. Like, that's a journey where a lot of times something happens in life to teach us that. It's not always the easiest. And I think also, like, we hear people talk about it. We see self-help books. We see people talking about it on podcasts and TV shows. But there's a difference between, like, understanding, like, the thought, and then understanding how many things are, like, subconsciously, like, taught to us that are so ingrained in the way we navigate life every single day, that that's the area that we have to kind of reteach and just say, hey, your authentic self is good enough. The things that you love are good enough to love. And, like, once you start to train that brain, that's when you start to navigate, because we subconsciously make decisions, like, so many times a day. So if your subconscious mind isn't connected to, like, the reality of knowing that you're worthy, knowing that being authentic is the best way to be, like, if your subconscious mind doesn't agree with that yet, then every decision you make, it's still going to be living out of lack. And I've helped so many different people see that, because I'll point out an action and I'm like, why did you just do that? Because we cling on to things, like you were talking about, like love, and how, because that subconscious mind wasn't healed yet, because you didn't love yourself, like, every relationship you went into was toxic. Because, like, there was probably lots of things that you were doing because their love gave you your value. And if they weren't giving you love, your value was also diminishing. So then you start to create actions, maybe controlling, maybe being victim, things that push people away that you want to come closer. And it's such a journey that it's not easy to go on, but once you start to make that journey and create better habits and better subconscious thoughts, it's a big change.
Definitely. Yeah. And something I talk about quite often is loving from a place of attachment and a place of purity. And certainly, you know, my journey was very much loving from a place of attachment. I'd place my worth in the other person's hands. So I'd give my power away. So I couldn't see a life without this person in it. So it didn't matter how they were behaving and whether I agreed with it or not. I was accepting it because I was afraid of them leaving. Do you know what I mean? Whereas today, because I have that love for myself, I won't accept that kind of behavior anymore. Do you know what I mean? But I also have an awareness around my own red flags, because I'm not perfect. I was, like you say, I was a victim and I was very needy and at times a little bit demanding. And there's a difference between having expectations in a relationship and boundaries in a relationship, but also having demands. Do you know what I mean? And I think for me, like I say, having taken that road less traveled, found that love for me, I can have healthy boundaries now with myself. I can have healthy expectations as well. And I also have an awareness of my own red flags. And when I feel a trigger popping up, I know that the way that I work through that is by, one, stopping, pausing, thinking about it, but then also taking the time to process it. Do you know what I mean? And then communicate. I think when it comes to relationships, sometimes we've got to have hard conversations about where our needs aren't being met, and, you know, constantly be renegotiating the relationship as we grow and we evolve through it.
Yeah. I mean, I think back at like early relationships in my life, and there were times where like something they did really upset me, but I was so afraid of losing them that I felt like if I was upfront and saying, "Hey, like I'm drawing a line here," that line would be the cause of the end of the relationship, to where I was like, I will not speak up because I don't want to lose my relationship. Whereas now, when I'm older and understand boundaries, I respect and love myself enough to say, "Hey, this is a boundary. I'm going to need you to respect it." And I love myself enough to say, if this person chooses to walk away because I have a boundary of self-love for myself,
Yeah.
that just means that I'm going to be on the journey of self-love by myself again until someone comes around that can respect boundaries. And I think that that's a huge weight lifted off of your shoulder in a relationship, because you never want to be in a relationship where you're afraid to stand up for yourself because you're afraid that that person's going to leave you. Because not only is that person leaving you in that situation, but if you've attached your self-worth or your identity to that relationship, it's like your identity and self-worth and everything is like leaving as well. So it's
Yeah.
like that scary space where like you definitely want to do the work of learning to love yourself before jumping in a relationship.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and I think this is where codependency comes in as well, when you start to become dependent on the other person, because you know, you've, as you say, you've attached your identity or your worth to this person, and the reality is, you know, you were okay before, you'll be okay afterwards. Do you know what I mean? And I often think as well, we can fall in love with the idea of someone and who we believe they could be, rather than who they actually are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes when a relationship hits a wobble, we can look at how good it was rather than how it is now. And sometimes it's about, yeah, relationships change all the time, and sometimes we grow together and sometimes we grow apart. And I think the secret is in, like I say, communicating, but also accepting, you know, that some people come into our lives for a reason, but sometimes, you know, they always come to teach us something, but sometimes we have to let go. And I think as well, when we come out of a relationship, that's an opportunity to love yourself more and actually look at where your needs weren't met in the last relationship, so that you don't then take whatever triggers occurred in the last into your next. Do you know what I mean? You want the next one to be better than the last.
Yeah. I think one of the relationships that I ended a couple years ago, when I was walking away from it, it was the first time I walked away from something where I didn't pick myself apart, where I didn't go from beginning of relationship to end and pick up all the things that I did wrong that could have possibly ended this relationship. And instead, I walked away with just, this was not the right time. We were not the right people at this moment for one another. It was healthier for us to walk away. And my mindset walking away, for once, I was not thinking I was lesser than because my relationship ended. I was thinking, you know what? Like, I'm still a great person. He's still a great person. We're just moving forward without one another in this lifetime right now. And I think when you have that mindset, like, you've done a lot of work to kind of get there. And then, of course, when it comes to triggers, that's something that I have to be aware of as well, because I know that there's certain things from my past traumas that get triggered from certain things. And I have to constantly be thinking, okay, was it what this person said, or is it what this person said that triggered an emotion that's very intense because it's been buried deep inside of me for a long time? And making sure that the reaction I have and the interaction I have with this person that triggered it isn't like me taking every piece of ammunition I've got and like sending a nuclear bomb over to them.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times that's what happens. And we just assume that they should have known better. But we're all so completely different individuals that we will never understand everyone's triggers.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think what you're getting at there is when we respond based on our emotions rather than, you know, our rational mind. And yeah, that's an art in itself. And I think it takes having done an element of work on yourself, to be able to have that control to actually step back and think, oh, I know what I want to say, but is that going to create the result that I want, or the outcome that I want? Because when we respond on impulse, you know, it can go from 0 to 100 really quickly. Whereas when we step back and we give ourselves that time to regulate, then we're able to stay in character and remain true to ourselves. And when we're authentically ourselves, people show us who they are. You know, we don't actually have to do anything. People show us who they are. Whether we accept what we're seeing or not is down to us. You know, that's our choice. But I just find living authentically versus living inauthentically, having done both, living authentically is far easier. Your people find you. And my experience has been, since I've started showing up unapologetically as myself on social media, I've found such a community of people who support, you know, who celebrate, who want to get behind you and help you in any way they can. And it's so beautiful when you find people like that, you know. And my past, you know, and this isn't a dig at anybody, but there were certain friendships that I had where they weren't that way. Do you know what I mean? Every time that I did want to do something that I felt intuitively was right for me, they'd criticize me, and I'd listen to that, and therefore I wouldn't move. Do you get what I mean? I'd stay where I was at. And so I think it's important as well, in terms of building that relationship with yourself, to actually, you know, take the time to connect with your intuition and understand that. And sometimes that means keeping certain things to yourself so that you can just hear your voice, you know. And that's powerful when you just hear your voice. And there's a great quote around that, isn't it? Make your moves in silence. And there's the reason for that, because as soon as you start letting other people come in to that, you know, you're going to get their opinions, you're going to get their perspective, their judgment. And don't get me wrong, that can be really great in some ways, and often it's meant with good intent, but sometimes it's their insecurities being projected on you, and then that instills some of your old triggers, has you in fear, and then you end up just leaving your dreams on the pillow. Do you know what I mean? And your ideas on the pillow.
Yeah.
Which is not how you're going to get to that purposeful, fulfilling life that ultimately, you know, is our birthright, and we all have a right to, if we're willing to take that action, of course, because it's not going to come to us. We've got to go after it.
Yeah. I mean, I like to work with clients and ask them, like, how often they're asking for advice from other people around them. Like, when it comes to your opinion, your beliefs, like, you know yourself better than most. And I think when it comes to asking for help, if it's something you don't know, or it's something you're new at, and you know that there's a person in your life who has more experience, go for it. Like, ask them for help. But when it comes to your personal decisions, I think a lot of times, if you notice, when you are asking other people, it's because there's a sense of insecurity there where you're needing validation.
Yeah.
So you're not really asking for an opinion, you're asking people to validate your opinion. And then a lot of times, because people are biased or people may have different views, they might not give you that validation. They may give you a different opinion. And then now you're arguing internally, externally, wherever it's happening. And instead of actually making the move towards this thing that you wanted to do to better your life, you are now sitting there arguing with someone, trying to give them reasons to get them to once again validate your opinions or thoughts. So it's really important to, like, ask yourself how often you're asking for permission or validation from other people for your ideas and thoughts, because sometimes it's just good to go with what you really believe, what you feel. And I know there's a healing process in that, because I know if you are used to toxic trauma lifestyle, that making good choices can feel very foreign to you. So a lot of times it's great to work with a professional in that sense to kind of help navigate through that, versus asking friends or family. If that's all you've got, that's great. But a lot of times professionals have a little bit better insight to kind of help you understand the trauma responses that you're feeling. Because if you grew up in abuse, if you grew up with certain traumas, that starts to, like, in your subconscious mind, feel normal.
Mm.
So your body naturally clings to what it knows and understands. It doesn't like unknown. It's scared of that. It's unsafe. It can't protect you from something it doesn't know how to like navigate. So your body will naturally pull you back to a toxic relationship if that's all you've ever had.
Mm.
And when it comes to moving forward, sometimes it does require some professional help to get you to see, hey, this is a healthy way of doing it. Because even I went through a lot of coaching to see the healthy, and I could
Mm.
feel my body naturally trying to go perform the way, like, I'm a people pleaser. My body wants to people please. Like, the subconscious mind is still trained in that, but I've consciously made myself more aware of like what it means to be in a healthy friendship, a healthy relationship, healthy communication with family. And I'm constantly having to like grow that side of me and continue to create healthy habits so that my subconscious mind feels more like confident in making healthier decisions for me.
Yeah, yeah. And you've raised, you know, a valid point around, you know, you can't know what you don't know. And, you know, this is why it's so important to invest in yourself, because when you commit your mind to a new material understanding, your life doesn't have to be the same again. Do you know what I mean? You can change your life. But yeah, it means seeking answers. And I think whether that's with therapy, whether it's with coaching, dependent on where you are in your journey. And that's often the hardest step, is the asking for help, admitting what you don't know and that your life's no longer working for you. Certainly it was for me, but the belief that carried me through was there's got to be more to life than this because I'm not happy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I realised nobody's coming to my rescue. So I've got to be my own rescue. And it's the first time where, you know, you spoke about people pleasing, the first time in my whole life where I finally made a decision without needing somebody else to sign it off for me. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I'm going to rehab, I'm going to get sober, I'm going to sort myself out. And I'm, you know, it was an ego crushing exercise. And I use that word not loosely. It really was, you know, to actually sit there and listen, get the answers, and then look at parts of myself that actually I didn't want to look at, if I'm honest, because it's hard, it's painful, you know, and you've got to relive certain things, and that's not an easy thing to go through. But when I started to build that awareness and realize that actually I'm not this perfect person that I try and put out into the world because I'm afraid that I'll be criticized or judged in some way, and that's okay. I'm me. And all the little quirks in my personality and in my voice and my mannerisms, they are what make me, you know. And today I'm incredibly proud of who I am. And I think we live in a society anyway, you know, we've spoken a bit about trauma, but conditioning, you know, we're conditioned in a way that has us disconnect from ourselves from a very early age, disconnect from others from a very early age, because society wants us to all be the same, because society wants us to kind of all be, I don't know, it wants us to be low vibe, low frequency, so that we're easier to control and manipulate in some way, because that serves the system that we live in. Do you know what I mean? So that's a trauma in itself, but it's down to our conditioning. And when I started to understand all of this, I've forgotten where I'm going with this point, but I'm going to continue anyway because it might come to. But when I started to understand all of this, and that my differences actually mean, yeah, this is where I was going. My differences actually mean by default that I have worthiness, because there's nobody else out there like me. So what I've been conditioned to believe about myself and other people and the world is actually a total lie. You know, what I'm being fed by the media in magazines and in TV series is a lie, you know, and to every lie there's a truth. And having found my truth, it was, I couldn't not then start to live it, because it would have been painful to go back to the life I knew, knowing what I found out through going through that process with therapy and then with coaching, you know. And it's beautiful when you get there. It really, really is, because your life just takes on this whole new meaning. It really does. And the passion that you find in the pain, just, yeah, it just fuels you in ways that, you know, the fear that you feel around certain things just falls away because the passion is just too strong.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah, it's crazy how it happens.
It's interesting because like you talk about like everything that made you unique is what you were made fun of and society has told you is not great, to where like if you ask adults these days where like what makes you unique, what makes you different, most people struggle to figure that out because they've cut all of that out because they're trying to fit in, because they're made to believe that's what you're supposed to do. So it's almost interesting to kind of get people to say, okay, between you and me, what makes us different than one another? What makes us unique from one another? Let's not look at the same, because we're kind of conditioned to like, okay, herd mentality, find a way to fit into the herd. So
Yeah.
we're always looking around us and trying to find what makes us the same, instead of using what makes us stand out in a crowd and utilizing that to kind of put ourselves ahead in life. And it's interesting because you talked about like society wanting us to kind of exist in certain realms, but you talked about you were so seeking external things to feel better, but society teaches us that, because
Yeah.
if they taught us that everything we need to feel good and happy is in here, then they couldn't sell us a new car, shampoos, and all the things that cost so much more money. They need us to believe that the answer to happiness exists somewhere on a shelf that we can purchase. And
Yeah.
that's what they trick us into. And the people that you see are the happiest people are the ones that do not connect their happiness to any external sources, because at the end of the day, any of that can be taken away. I think even the pandemic proved to us a lot of things that we thought could never be taken away from us could actually be taken away. So it's asking people to like identify themselves with stuff that cannot be taken away. Like, who are you at the core that can never be taken away no matter how hard anyone tries? And I think that when people start focusing on that, which is not easy for people to figure out because we've been trained so far away from ever thinking of ourselves in that way, it's interesting to work with people through that process.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You know, and again, my experience was I had no idea who I was. You know, if people asked me who I was, the kind of things that would come up would be my name, my job title,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And beyond that, I couldn't really share anything else. Do you know what I mean? But I think when you do go through that process, you actually realise that beyond all, because, you know, our trauma, our conditioning, everything else, it all shapes us into who we become. And of course, we are all unique. But I think at the core of our being is love. I really do. And I think that we're all put on this world to bring something, you know, one of a kind to it through our personalities, and to shine, you know, our love over other people. Do you know what I mean? But it's very hard, like I said earlier, for people to find you when you're not showing up as who you are authentically. So that's why it's so important. And it does take, you know, going through your past, going through your belief system and making shifts with that. And I do think, you know, accountability helps, whether that's with therapy, with coaching, etc. Wherever you are on the journey, it's so important. But when you realize that, you know, love is very much at the center and at the core of your being, you know, and you shine your light through everything, you show other people how they get to love you, but you also become an example of how they get to love themselves too. It goes two ways, you know. If hurt people, healing people, heal people, and that's really powerful too. But yeah, it's just beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. I've done a lot of different exercises with people where we have to go back and show love to the person that made some decisions that maybe weren't so great for us, because a lot of times we still have a little bit of hatred towards parts of ourselves. And I think until we can go back and love all of those parts and say, hey, thank you for teaching me a lesson. Thank you for loving yourself enough to keep going. Thanks for like going into that space you needed to go in to keep us safe at this moment. Like, you have to understand that all the parts of you that existed and did what they did needed to happen for you to get to this point right now. And it can be hard to go back and say, hey, thank you for like doing this stupid stuff that ended up with some really hard consequences, but thank you for teaching me this lesson. And don't look back at pictures and go, wow, I was a horrible person here. Like, because a lot of times we speak so violently and hateful towards our past selves, and you can't do that and love the person you are today at the same time.
No, no, exactly. And this is where I think forgiveness is so important, of self, but also of others. So using the bullying in childhood as an example of that, I had to forgive those experiences and those people. I'd carried it around with me for years and years and years, even after the events. But I had to forgive them for what they did. But I also had to forgive myself for allowing for it. It went both ways. And forgiveness is a very personal process that you have to go through, you know, in your own time and in your own way. But I think it's so important in terms of clearing that wreckage of your past so that you can open yourself up to love yourself. Because if you've not forgiven somebody, then what you're actually carrying is resentment. Do you know what I mean? And that often holds us back in some way. Or it could be that you've done something and no other person has played a part in that, and it could be that you're carrying shame around that, you know. But all of these negative emotions, they act as blockages to the love that is within us. Do you know what I mean? And they are what create that void. So it's so important to again go through that process of opening ourselves up to it. And like I say, it is a personal process. It's also absolutely okay to not be in a place where you want to do that right now. You know, it took me a long time. Like I say, I carried it for a good 15 years before I got to that point. And actually, if I hadn't have hit rock bottom with alcohol, I wouldn't have been willing to do it. Do you know what I mean? It was because I got to a point where it's like, I've got to be my own rescue. So no matter what happens, I will do whatever it takes to, you know, change my life. And that's what happens. And I think people change often based on either pain or inspiration. Do you know what I mean? Or a combination of the two. You need one or the other to be there. Otherwise, there's no motivation. And I think long term, you need discipline. But in the beginning, you need some sort of motivation, and it normally comes from either being in sufficient pain or, you know, being sufficiently inspired by somebody, which is, again, I think why people's stories are so important, because our stories deeply connect us as humans. And again, I think we've been conditioned to not be vulnerable with who we are and our stories, etc. But actually, when you can share your story from the perspective of a survivor, it offers hope to somebody else out there who may be where you were 3-4 years ago, and that offers hope. Do you know what I mean? And from that, they can draw inspiration. So I think they often remind us of our shared humanity, and that actually we're not as alone as we sometimes think we are with some of the issues that we face as we go through life. Yeah.
Something you kind of touched on when it came to like forgiveness and letting go and kind of healing some of the connections that you have with people. And if you don't do that, you're allowing those things to kind of control all your actions. And Taylor Swift actually was talking about how she was so busy trying to prove to other people, like, they said she couldn't do this, so she went and did it. They said she couldn't do this, so she went and did it. And she was proving to them she had the ability to do it, but she was also being controlled by those people because they were pretty much pointing in every direction. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. She wasn't doing what she wanted to be doing. She was just doing everything to prove to other people that she could do something. And when she made that mind shift of, I'm going to do whatever I want to do and be amazing at it, she made that shift of, I'm no longer controlled by what other people say I can or cannot do. I'm going to do what I want to do because I'm a powerful individual that can do this. And I think that hearing her say that helped me understand there was a lot of things I was doing to prove to people I could, even though it wasn't something I wanted to do at all. It's like, I could care less about this achievement. I was only doing it to prove to you because you said I couldn't do it. And I think that that's a really important lesson to learn, because a lot of times we start making all these achievements and we're like, why do I not feel great still? And it's like, well, were those achievements you wanted to achieve, or were you trying to prove to others around you that you were worth something? And once you start to realize, like, you were always worthy, your worth never diminished. You just chose to believe that it didn't exist until other people said you had it. And if you keep chasing those things, thinking at the end you'll be happy, you'll get to the end of that achievement list and realize that you didn't work towards anything that really truly did make you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so powerful what you just shared there, you know, and it's so true, isn't it? And I mean, I was thinking when you were saying that about when I went to uni, I chose to study geography just because I was good at it, because I was the first child from my family to go to uni, and I thought, you know, that's what I should do. Do you know? But I didn't want to do it, and I never used the degree. Do you know what I mean? Now I'm doing a degree because I study psychotherapy, but it's because I love it and it's what I want to do, and I'm so passionate about it. I love going to my lectures and everything else. It's amazing. But it took me certain things to get to that point. Do you know what I mean? When I went through that process, and I think you alluded to this earlier, of doing that inner work on myself, I started to see that every single situation and circumstance in my life brought me to where I was. So none of it was a mistake, an accident, or anything. It happened that way to make me who I am today, and ultimately put me on the path that was meant for me, you know. And so I've got no regrets about anything I've ever done in my life anymore. I don't beat myself up about the past. I actually think my past is one of my greatest assets, in that, you know, it's made a story. Do you know what I mean? That, like I say, when you can be vulnerable and share that, then it can help somebody else, which is why I'm quite open about who I am on social media, because I just think this is who I am. Do you know what I mean? And if you don't like who I am, that's for you, that's fine, because I'm not for everyone, everyone's not for me. But I do it for the people who I am for. Do you know what I mean? The people who need to hear my message. And that's what it's about. And I think when you go through those experiences and you start to see that they all happened for a reason, it didn't happen to you, it happened for you, which is a bit cliche, it's not original idea, but it's it happens for you, not to you. And when you can get to that point where you've had that perspective shift, you start to see that actually a life for service is, you know, just the way to be if you want to live a purposeful, fulfilling life that speaks to what you're passionate about, because in the pain is passion, you know. And there's a lot of fear, I think, about pursuing the truth about yourself, but I think this is where you have to have the faith. And like I say, my story was just having that belief in the beginning that there's got to be more to life than this, because I'm not happy. And that was the faith that drove me through in the beginning, just holding on to that belief.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to like acts of service, I think a lot of times we're so pushed towards something because that's the only example we've ever had. A lot of people you see, they fall into things that maybe parents or mentors did because they weren't open to seeing other things, or at some point they were told the thing that they have as a gift wasn't good enough. I know for a really long time I sat there and I was like, I have a really caring heart, but nobody pays you to have a caring heart. Like, no one cares about that. And I was sitting there so focused on seeing what other people were doing. And I'm like, you don't need a heart to do that. You don't need it to do that. And I had just convinced myself that like that was something I would just not be able to use. That was something that was just a part of me. And I actually felt like a lot of times it didn't help or assist in any way. It made things harder because I didn't want to screw other people over. I wanted to help everyone. I wanted the whole team to succeed. I didn't need to be number one. I wanted everyone to succeed and be number one. And in that realm of life that I was being taught that life is a competition, life is this, you have to be number one at this, I didn't fit in too well to that. And it wasn't until one day I was sitting down with a group of my friends and we sat there and we were like, well, what types of things am I good at? What types of things do I love? What brings me to life? And like you, I went to school for architecture. So not using that degree. And now I've been going through all the certifications to be the most certified person in coaching. I am constantly absorbing knowledge to see new things, new perspectives to share and help people. And that type of thing excites me. And I'm excited to continue growing in that area. Whereas before, like, my family helped pay for my school, and the excitement wasn't really there. It was just almost like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Whereas when I started doing the coaching and my mom reached out and she's like, I want to help, like, pay for some things. How can I help you? Like, tears came to my eyes because I had someone that was like, what do you want to do? Like, where is your passion? Where is your heart? I want to help you with that. And like, that feeling is so much different, but it required me to figure that out. It required me to tell the world and be my most authentic self, because sometimes we are so convinced like this is what they want to hear and we regurgitate that, and then they're like, here, let me help you. Whereas if we were like, hey, this is what's really on my heart, and they're like, hey, let me help you, the outcome is very different. And a lot of times people are showing us love, but in the wrong way, because we've told them, here's how we want to be loved, and it's not what we really mean.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And you know, you spoke a little bit about your mum there and parents, and I think parents, they always want what's best for you, but they want to protect you as well. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes when it comes to your kind of career path, and I'm thinking entrepreneurship, for example, because you have to take certain risks when it comes to, you know, entrepreneurship, they aren't always the best person to go to for advice. You know what I mean? And I'm just being, you know, and this is just my experience, and certainly experiences that I've heard from other entrepreneurs, in that, yeah, they do. They want to protect you, which is coming from a place of love. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And certainly when I think about my mum, for instance, in the beginning, when I said about what I wanted to do, she was like, are you sure that's a good idea? Do you know, you sure you want to share your story with people? She was worried for me. Do you know what I mean? Because she knew that that could come with some judgment and people's opinions. And of course, seeing how I used to be in childhood, she was thinking, are you strong enough to deal with some of that? Do you know what I mean? And certainly 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been. That's what I was living in authentically, right? But today, you know, it's very different. But she always supported me. And once I kind of got on that journey, she really got behind me and was like, oh, I love what you're doing. And yeah, and, you know, how can I help you? Similar to what you said. So sometimes it's about listening to people's opinions, but also recognizing that just because somebody's given you an opinion or a bit of an advice or a bit of guidance, it doesn't mean you have to take it. Do you know what I mean? Even feedback, you don't have to take it. And I think a lot of the time when we struggle with things like feedback, it's because whilst we want to grow as humans, of course we do, we also want to be accepted as we are now. And we feel like in some way we are being rejected just because somebody said to us that actually, you know, we could improve by doing X, or, you know, whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've always told people, when it comes to when friends come to you for advice, the best thing that you could probably do is just ask questions. Don't give advice, because you are going to give biased advice. And whether it's because there's limitations that you currently have or limitations that someone else has told you exist, it's better to not try to give advice to people. It's better to just keep asking questions, because if you ask questions, you will create thoughts in their head that they might have not asked themselves. Because I know that for me personally, I ask myself a million questions, but I can get caught in a loop of like chaos that I can't get out of. And all it takes is one person to ask a question that I hadn't asked myself, and it like pulls me out that loop and sends me in a direction that I would have never found on my own. So that's what a lot of people don't realize is helpful. Like, just brainstorming, critical thinking with someone. Don't try to give advice if it's not in a realm that you're an expert in. And then even then, like, something that maybe made one entrepreneur super successful will not necessarily work for someone else. So I always say, like, if I was successful at something, what questions got me there?
Yeah.
And then can I ask those same questions to someone else so that they can get the answers they need to be successful in whatever direction? Because no one can be successful in someone else's lane. You have to be in your own lane.
Yeah.
And if someone else gave you advice based upon, oh, well, back in the 60s when I was starting my business, that's irrelevant. It's not going to help me, I promise.
No.
So you have to realize, like, questions are better than a lot of times giving advice.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where things like coaching is so powerful, isn't it? Because it gets you to access your own inner resourcefulness. Because all the answers to every single question, you know, that we've ever asked ourselves is within us. We perhaps need a bit of help finding some of those answers. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do occasionally like a little bit of advice. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe not advice from friends. I think sometimes I welcome their perspectives. Do you know what I mean on things? But I think the thing that I often do if a friend comes to me for my perspective on something is I'll ask their permission before I give it. I just think it's courteous. I'll say, do you want my opinion on this? Do you know what I mean? And then I will give it. Because sometimes people just want to be heard as well. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's about trusting where they are and what they actually want, you know, and that often comes with a question too, you know, what are you wanting to get from out of this? You know what I mean? And whatever the context might be, it comes with questions, doesn't it? But yeah, I think quite often we try and self-identify with what somebody is saying is the ego. Do you know what I mean? And I've read a book on it. I think it's called Time to Think. And apparently we do this within 30 seconds of someone starting a conversation with us and they're saying, this has happened to me. And then you'll try and identify with it yourself to take the focus off them and back onto you. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature that we do this in our interactions with friends and things like this. But once you become aware of it, you can't unsee it. And sometimes that person's actually going through something really difficult and they just want to be heard. Do you know what I mean? And it's really not about us in that moment. And yeah, it's about, I don't know, seeing these things in ourselves. And I guess it's, you know, we'll never get it perfect ever, but being reflective with ourselves, where we are, how can I be better tomorrow? And recognizing that progress is all that's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when it comes to, because I have to constantly pull myself out of coach mode when I'm with people. And I've got some pretty strong friends who will call me out on it pretty quickly. I'd like to think I've developed some friendships of people who do not ever walk on eggshells, which I appreciate. I would rather be called out for it than make someone feel bad or feel like they're not being heard. But there's definitely some people where I know that if I'm in a mood and I need like certain attention from people, that there's certain ones I can't go to, because when I share something, a lot of times they'll flip it and start talking about themselves. And I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I'm the type of person where if I'm struggling and then someone shares a story, I will flip and start trying to help them out. So like I have to remember that it's just like, okay, like, is the person I'm about to connect with someone who has the capability of connecting with me in the way that I need them to connect with me?
Yeah.
Because not everyone's capable. And I've also learned that not everyone's gone through the certifications and books that I've read to better connect and help people. So I also have to be like, okay, like this is their way of connecting and loving me in this moment. And I have to be a little bit more forgiving of when people do try to flip the story to relate to me in a way where I'm just like, I didn't really need you to relate and tell me your story. I just needed you to tell me I'm going to be okay, or that I'm not the only one, and just kind of leave it at that. But like you were saying before, like if someone comes to you asking what they need from you is really important, because you never know. Like maybe they need you to inspire them. Maybe they need you to hug them. Maybe they need you to cry with them. Like sometimes I've realized there's times where I just need people to agree that the world isn't easy. I
Yeah,
don't need to be told that, oh, well, you're just looking at it and making it harder than it needs to be. I'm like, can you just agree that it's hard sometimes?
yeah,
It's very interesting, but asking what they need is a great way to kind of make that shift to understanding what they need in that moment.
yeah. Definitely, definitely. And you know, you were talking a little bit about people pleasing as well, and um, certainly that used to be me too. I mean, I was one of these people. Because I didn't know myself, I had no boundaries. Do you know what I mean? Or I did have boundaries, but they were very weakly held. And I often found that I would almost be over helpful to everybody else, and that was very two-way in terms of one, I wanted to be helpful, but I also wanted to detract from my own stuff. Do you know? It's a bit of both when I did that work, and that was a hard realization because I didn't realize that that was partly to do with it, but it absolutely was. I was getting something from it too. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, why would I do that? There's got to be a payoff. Do you know what I mean? Um, so yeah, and it's again having those boundaries, I think, and also we spoke about, you know, what identifying what they need, helping them to identify that, but also identifying what you can give. Do you know what I mean? Because if you give everything away, then you've got nothing left for you, and that's not what self-love's about. Do you know what I mean? You've got to, it's about filling your own cup up first, and you know, loving from others from your saucer. You know, it really is. That's when your love doesn't run out, because you're constantly balancing between helping other people get what they need, but also making sure that you've got what you need first. And when you do that, you're far more valuable and useful to other people, because
Yeah.
you've got this endless supply of love. Do you know what I mean? To give.
Yeah. My group of leaders with Positive Space, we did a self-saboteur quiz to kind of understand like the things that we do to sabotage our own happiness, success, and goals. And people pleasing was definitely up there for me. But when it came to my friend Val, who came and spoke to us about our saboteurs, she was talking to me about the like unsigned contracts that a lot of us have when it comes to doing acts of service for people.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until she said that I realized that there was a lot of things I was doing for other people with the assumption that that meant in return they were going to do something else without ever saying that. So it was like a contract of, I'm going to be kind to you, I'm going to help you out here. And it wasn't necessarily like I need you to do the exact same thing in return, but it was like, in my time of need, you will be someone that will be there for me, or you will not be a dickhead to me in the future because I'm a good person and I've helped you today. And it wasn't until I started realizing there was a lot of things I was doing with an invisible contract that was in my subconscious mind,
Yeah.
in my mind in general. But I was doing a lot of acts with the assumption that in return, I will get something good in return by doing this thing. And when I realized, okay, I'm going to start thinking more critically of, am I doing this just because I'm kind, or am I doing this because I'm lacking and feeling like they owe me something, or I'm attaching, I need the validation. Like when you start to realize like, what are my actions tied to, you start to see, oh, I'm actually doing this because I'm a good person and I wanted to do this, versus I'm doing this because I need people to think I'm a good person,
Yeah.
and this act will definitely get me that title that I'm seeking to be validated by. And once you realize that that's also an area that you can be controlled in your mind, you
Yeah.
can let that go and kind of live a little bit more freely. And then in moments where like, hey, I don't want to do this, it's just like, hey, I don't want to do this. It's not, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'll be a horrible person. I'll be labeled a horrible person. So I've got to do this now.
No, exactly, exactly. And you know, something else to say about, you know, helping other people is the love you put out in the world, you will always get back. you know, but you're not always going to get it back from the person that you originally gave that love to. But love has this, well, everything is energy, isn't it? That's the law of attraction. Everything is energy, and the energy that you emit will inform the energy that you get back, you know. And once you kind of realize that, you know, yeah, what you put out, you will get back, then you kind of realize that actually just faith is the answer, isn't it, to a lot of these things, in terms of I'm helping this person without any expectation of anything in return, but somebody else will cross my path in my time of need who will help me. Because actually, you know, that I didn't get to where I am today, having been, you know, alcoholic, drinking every single day, without a lot of help from other people. But the people that I thought would help me were not the people that did help me. Now, this isn't because they were bad people. This is because they weren't able to help me. Do you know what I mean? Because the help I needed couldn't have come from a friend. I needed to understand the illness I was struggling with. I needed to work through that trauma. So I needed to see therapists. I also needed to be among people like me who were living the life that I needed to start living. And I wasn't going to learn that by going back to the people who I'd been associating with when I was drinking. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So you kind of realize that actually the help you put out will always come back to you, but it's not going to come from the same people, because as you grow, you're going to need different people. It's just how it works. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, people,
I mean, if you think about it like money wise, like if you give someone who needs money, it's not like that person's going to become a millionaire overnight and just be like, hey, here's money back when you need it. But like the funniest thing I always point out to people, like, is when they hold a door for someone and someone doesn't say thank you and their response is like, bitch. I'm like, okay, so were you holding the door because you needed that thank you, because you needed that, like, hey, I'm a good person vibe? Or were you just holding it because you were able and that person needed someone to hold the door? But it's so funny, like, how quickly someone's good deed can just instantly trigger them to be the complete opposite if someone doesn't thank them or respond in the way that they thought was appropriate to their good deed. It's just like, okay, you gotta think a little bit, because there's definitely times where people are not in the mindset to, like, respond the way you want them to respond.
Yeah.
But that's okay, and you shouldn't instantly switch into anger mode, because then that good deed that you could have just been like, I put something good into the world, and just keep walking. Now you've switched to, people are so ungrateful and I don't even know why I do good things for people. No one ever cared. Like, you've switched instantly into a mindset that's going to attract more crazy chaos. It's like, how quickly do most people switch into that mindset? And it's scary how many people do.
Yeah. And I was just going to say that once you've done that, you tend to spiral and attract more, you know, undesirable stuff as you go through the day. And that, again, you know, the law of attraction working, and the energy that you're putting out. And I think other examples of this are things like, you know, when people beep the horn because you've cut them up or something like that, and you don't know what that person, you know, they might have drove dangerously, or whatever, but they might be rushing to the hospital, for instance, because something's gone wrong. Do you know what I mean? Or, you know, a loved one's in need. You just don't know what anyone else is going through. Do you know what I mean? Unless they tell you. And I think we often make the assumption that if somebody is out in public, then they're okay. But actually, or they're wearing a smile, then they're okay. But we wear so many different masks, you know, even when we are living authentically, because it's impossible to be 100% authentic all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because that, again, would be a form of perfection, wouldn't it? Which is impossible. It's impossible to be 100% anything all the time. And so it really is just about, working on yourself and just trying to be a better person tomorrow than you were today, and forgiving yourself in those moments when you get it wrong. Do you know what I mean? But also being, like I say, being reflective, thinking, how can I get that better next time? And yeah, we're all a work in progress. We're all a work in progress, and that's to me is the beautiful thing about life. The fact that the work's never done, and there'll always be more to learn, more to find out about ourselves, about other people, about the world, and yeah, I'm just a lifelong learner in that way. I absolutely love it. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's a beautiful note to wrap up on. I see that we got close to the hour. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on here and talking. I could probably talk to you for hours.
Uh,
Um, so if there's ever anything that I can do for you, I would love to help you out. If there's anything you want to shout out here at the end to wrap up the call, feel free to do that. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation.
yeah, me too. I've really enjoyed the conversation too. It's been great to talk about these things, you know, because like I say, I'm so passionate about them. But I'll definitely have you on my podcast as well soon, coming into Who You Are. Yeah, definitely. It's series 2's out next week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah. Take care. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Bye.
no problem. Bye.